Good morning. Welcome to Sussex County, New Jersey. We're in the farthest northwestern part of the state of New Jersey. We're not far from the Delaware River. And what brings us here today is I'm looking for a Native American rock shelter known as Bevans Rock Shelter. And a few years ago I was doing research on Native American sites that were publicly accessible in the region, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Delaware. And I came across some information about this site, and I just wanted to see if we can film it and document it and see what it looks like in 2024. So it's mid-November. It's a cool, clear morning here, Sunday morning, and we're gonna see if we can find this rock shelter that may have been inhabited by people for over 10,000 years. Now, I know that I'm roughly in the right location, but there's no real path or trail here. So we just gotta make our way generally in this direction. See what we find. I think it's very likely that we're walking on this precipice of rocks, and we're probably directly above the shelter. So I'm going to walk along this rock ledge here, and then we'll walk below it and see if we can discover this fascinating historical place. So the journey that brought me out here to this place today began about 3 years ago. As I said in the beginning, when I came across some information online and I began reading a PDF file that was a book and a research document written in the early 1900s, I believe 1914 or 1915. A German immigrant, an anthropologist named Max Schrebich, documented this region of Sussex County in the years of 1912 and 1913. And he documented a series of Native American villages, encampments, and in this case, stone rock shelters. And basically this area we're walking right now was inhabited by Native Americans for thousands of years. So I'm hoping to reach this rock shelter and maybe have a cup of coffee in a place that somebody else was sitting maybe 8,000 years ago. I know it's hard to believe, but that's what I'm trying to do here. Got something here. All right, so what we have here is a tiny little cave. Goes back about 10 feet, looks to be about 3 feet tall, and probably a nice little animal den. Certainly a place that a person could spend the night pretty comfortably. Wow. Now I do believe in my research I read that there was a formation just south of the main formation, and that may be what we're looking at here. So this particular crevice here, as I said, it goes back a short distance, about 10 feet, then it stops. I'm just looking around. Wouldn't surprise me if this was a nice place for, you might find some snakes in the warmer months. I don't see any indication of any animals in here. It's leafy here in the front, but bare ground in the back. Nice and warm in here. And you know, we are on public land and you're not allowed to take any kind of artifacts or really go looking for them, and that's not what I'm doing here. I wouldn't do that, but it would be pretty interesting to find something from the Native Americans here. But no doubt we're coming and going out of this small crevice over the centuries and millennia. Continuing on, heading northbound, there's a open area, a wetland to the right here, and this ledge of rocks to the left. Haven't yet seen what I'm looking for specifically, but there is what looks like a faint footpath here that I'm following. I was just looking down in that little spot there, came around the bend here, and I think we found it. The Bevans Rock Shelter. Not a prehistoric, but a home to people, possibly for nearly 12,000 years. Oh my God. Wow. So we know a good deal about this particular location based on the writings in Schrebesh's volume, Indian Habitations of Sussex County. And I'll be telling you a little bit about that while we're here. But right now I want to look around. But this place was excavated in the early 1900s, around 1913. And over 1,000 pieces of pottery were found from an estimated 20 different pots, and also arrowheads, Neolithic tools, and all manner of evidence of habitation right on this ground we're standing on right now.
A fine rock shelter, rich in archaeological remains, 300 feet above the level of the river, on John Schoonover's farm, 1/2 mile west of Bevans. It is probably the only Indian rock shelter between Flatbrook and Port Jervis. An eastward-facing rock ledge trending north-northeast and parallel to the river limits a shallow depression on the west, through which flows a small brook tributary to Flatbrook. The rock house is at the foot of the ledge, facing the basin, which is usually swampy in times of heavy rains. It has an eastern exposure and consists of 3 parts. To the left, a typical overhanging rock, 24 feet long, with the roof from 10 to 14 feet above the floor and projecting 8 feet. In the center, another overhanging rock, 22 feet long, with roof 8 feet high and projecting 6 feet, but protected in front by 2 detached masses of rock, one small, the other large, lying 5 feet from the rear wall. And at the right, a cave-like compartment, 16 feet long, 4.5 feet wide, and 6 feet high. All 3 parts lie in an approximately straight line at the foot of the low cliff, and their total length is about 62 feet. Max Schrabisch.
This room we're in here now would almost make like a perfect bedroom or sleeping area. It's nearly completely enclosed, about 4 feet wide, about 7 feet tall. Here's a look from the far end now, looking back at the shelter, and that is the open area, the overhang, and the back room area that we were in. So I'm going to read to you another account, description of the shelter itself. And as I'm reading this to you, I'll show you his drawing and some pictures that I've taken here. But it says, the open shelter to the left yielded the most aboriginal remains and the middle section the least. The dirt floor underneath the rock was level and composed of light sand mixed with rocks. The rear wall was smoke-stained and discolored by ancient fires, but no relics were noted on the surface. The first telltale marks of the red man's former presence under this rock were, as usual, chips found about 3 inches below the top. After that, relics came to light to a depth of 2 feet, where the rock floor was reached. A trench was dug along the rear wall towards the extreme left, revealing the well-known signs of a fireplace about 12 feet long. And it goes on to say that altogether, there were obtained in 3 parts of this rock shelter at least 1,000 pieces of pottery belonging probably to about 20 different pots. Judging by the various decorations employed, as well as by the color and varying thickness of the material. Flint, jasper, and argillite furnished the material for the arrow points and spearheads discovered under this rock. In view of the abundance of artifacts unearthed under this rock, there can be no question that it was much resorted to by the Indians. It appealed to them for 2 reasons. In the first place, its excellent configuration or structure. Second, its location, since it is only 1 mile from the Delaware and less than 1/2 mile from the Great Indian River Trail, which is now known as Old Mine Road, which we were driving on earlier. Later on changed into the Old Mine Road. It also seems certain that had this rock lain a few miles further inland, it would not have been occupied, such as was the attraction of the Delaware River. Considering the materials found, we may assume that it was tenanted more or less permanently, perhaps for winter quarters. The fireplace suggests cooking, and the pottery indicates that the squaws and children accompanied the men and shared their quarters. So I think what I'd like to do now is I'd like to set up and just sit down and make a little cup of coffee and just think about this place and everything that's happened here, because it's a bit overwhelming to me. I mean, this is really putting the discovery in nature adventure discovery today. And I do thank you for joining me here. But yeah, let's make a cup of coffee and talk about what life may have been like for someone trying to live here thousands of years ago. So the first people that would have lived in this region would have began occupying this land at the end of when the Wisconsin ice sheet, the last glaciers, retreated, and that was about 10,000 BC, so about 12,000 years ago. Now, little is known of these people. They're called the Paleolithic people because they had no written language, and not much at all remains from their life. But the Paleolithic people were hunters and gatherers. So when the ice sheets retreated, and this part of New Jersey was under ice, it was glaciated. The landscape here, of course, was much different back then. It was much colder, more like what you would find in Canada today, more like tundra, very swampy, lots of marshes, open spaces, no oak or maple or any type of deciduous trees. It would have been all evergreen trees growing in sparse clumps here and there. And as the ice retreated, large game moved into the region. The Paleolithic people were hunters and gatherers, so they never stayed settled in one place at a time. Their whole existence was based on just trying to survive, just trying to find their next meal. So 10,000 years ago, this area would have been right around us. We would have had woolly mammoth and mastodon and mountain lion and wolves and moose and elk and bear. Here in New Jersey, it's pretty hard to believe. But the early Paleolithic people were the predecessors of the people that the white men discovered in the 16 and 1700s, known as the Lenni Lenape. That was the tribe that occupied this area. More specifically, in this region, the Muncie Lenni Lenape, because there were two different dialects spoken by the Lenni Lenape. And the northern range here, they spoke something called Muncie. Now, over time, the Lenni Lenape, over thousands of years, the Native Americans learned to do some farming, some agriculture. They could grow certain crops. They learned certainly what plants, what berries, what was edible, what was medicinal, and they were very in sync with the natural world around them because they had to be. So the Lenni Lenape established, they had more of a semi-permanent settlements, whereas their ancestors had to constantly move to follow the animals. And because we are next to the Delaware River, and as I said, just to the west of us is Old Mine Road, which was the Great Indian Trail, which was a well-known trade and migration route north and south through this part of the country. There were many settlements in this region. Now, as I said earlier, and it was described in the writing, the appeal of this particular rock shelter was that it faces to the east. And what you'll get is rising sun, which means more sunlight and more heat. Now, my understanding is a similar type of setup, if it was facing in the opposite direction, they would have never even bothered with it because it just wouldn't have worked. So it's just really fascinating to be here, to think about all the history that's been here. And that's just a little background on, and I'm no expert, so if you're a professional and you're watching this, I'm doing my best as an amateur to try and describe some basic things here. But I'm gonna go check on the coffee, then we'll sit down and I'm gonna ponder on what life must have been like a few thousand years ago trying to survive. So we're sitting here having a cup of coffee, and all I can think about in my mind is that 2,000 years ago, maybe before the birth of Christ even, there was somebody else sitting right here and cooking or working on shaping some tools or doing whatever were chores or necessary things they had to do. I started thinking last night about what it would be like thousands of years ago to live, just as a human being, to survive in a place like this. The climate was much colder, and what you got to realize is these people spent their whole life living outside, their whole entire life, okay? And in the wintertime, temperatures would get down to zero, below zero. Maybe you would go for months without even reaching freezing. And I just thought about how tough, because I think tough is the word, how tough that life would be and how tough those people were. Because life was all about, it was all about survival. It was all about just finding your next meal. I mean, think about that. Really think about that. Every day of your life was based on trying to find enough food to eat. And I know in the hunter-gatherer period, they say, anything that moved was edible. And there was no, probably very, very little time for leisurely activities, if there were. I mean, I'm sure human beings with their creative minds found ways to pass the time, but just think about from the moment of birth and conception, and you're giving birth out here, and if the mother and the baby survive the birth, then there's the feeding of the infant and the raising of the infant, and just there was no understanding of germ theory and what caused disease and sickness. They knew of certain plants and things that would help with certain ailments, perhaps. Lifespans were very short, very short. And people didn't get the proper nutrients and nutrition that they needed to live long and healthy lives, really. So it just, I couldn't even sleep at last night. I was thinking about it, and it just blew my mind. And I think about the time and the place we live in now, and it's the complete opposite. We have, like, our life isn't based on trying to survive. It's everything but that. We're just completely distracted 90% of the time with all kinds of things that aren't really essential to survival. That we've created a society now where we can survive with, without having to work too hard, really. I don't know. It just amazed me. It just amazes me to be here. So we've now made it up to we're now above the rock shelter. So the rock I'm standing on here is actually underneath us is the rock shelter. Now, I also read in the literature there may be another formation about 100 yards north of here, referred to as possibly the Indian Cavern or the Sandy Stone Chamber. So we're gonna see if we can find that one too. Let's go check it out. We got something ahead here. Clearly a wall of some type. No way to know how old this structure is, but we have a man-made structure here as well. This looks like it's probably modern, but you can see how this man-made wall is built into this existing rock face here. I have no idea what that is. Alright, so we explored the area above the shelter and found that old wall, some old trash remains, garbage, and now we're going to see if we can find this this other location known as the Sandy Stone Chamber. We're right on the edge of the swamp, and there is a path here, but I'm not liking it. It's really wet. Oh, my feet are gonna get soaked. Oh man. Oh, well, we've come this far. Oh my God. Oh Jesus. Oh, gotta get out of this swamp. Well, I just seen what looked like the remnants of an old tree stand out here, so I think that's what that trash was. I see something promising as an airplane goes overhead. What I read was that there was a chamber that was created. I think this is it. Oh wow. Yeah. But again, is this ancient or is this modern? I'm not sure. Now, citing a source. Now, my source here is Richard F. Dalton in his book Caves of New Jersey, written for the Department of Environmental Protection, New Jersey Geological Society. And it says that there are 3 rock shelters along this cliff bank that we've been walking along, and it does indicate a 3rd one here known as Indian Cave, but I've also seen it referred to as the Sandy Stone Shelter. And what I read online was that this passage was created by capping this narrow crevice with 13 stones were laid by man across the top of this passage to create this chamber. Is it Indian, or was it done in more modern times? I'm not sure. There's not a lot of information about it, but I'll show it to you anyway. Let's check it out. Here we are now entering the chamber, and you can see the large flat rocks that were placed above this narrow crevice. It goes back about 30 feet, maybe 10 to 12 feet high, and then it dead ends right here. Oh, wow. So again, I'm not entirely clear if this passage dates back to Native American times, to the woodland period or the historic period, or it was created by white settlers, possibly from 1600 and beyond, but it's still, either way, old and historic. I just don't have the documentation right now. I'll see if I can find something online when I go home. But again, just this narrow little chamber. Not really sure what it would be used for, but it's fascinating. Very interesting stuff. Amazing nature, adventure, discovery.